webinar is specifically to share with you a practical example of conducting a quantitative research. And so you'll be seeing a lot of numeric analysis because it's a quantitative project. But before I do that and give the details, I thought it will be important to just give a little background of myself because this data was taken in the past. So it's good to give a little bit background of myself. So I am originally from Ghana, which is in West Africa. And that's where I did my master's and bachelor's degree. And then I moved to Hong Kong, where I did my PhD and worked also in Macau, where this project actually took place. But currently I am a lecturer at the University of Queensland. So I'm presenting all the way from Australia, a very different time zone, probably for many of you. So that's a little bit about my background. And then I would like to highlight a little bit of what Alicia did mention of what I do and where my research interests are. So my research interests are in 3 broad areas: sustainable tourism development, small and medium tourism enterprises, and tourist studies. So over the course of my journey, I've been doing research in these areas. Some are more specific, some also look at the intersection between, let's say, sustainable development and travelers' behavior. And so I've done a lot of work on backpackers, their sustainable practices when they travel, and also volunteer tourists, as well as volunteer tourists that are staying in local homes. So these are all my interest areas. But the specific study we are doing, I'm going to talk about today, is part of sustainable tourism development, and specifically on resident. I thought it would be interesting to share this about how the project or the research journey is, that when the paper is published, what you see out there is just, the tip of the iceberg, but there is so much underneath it. And I am hoping that in this presentation, we will get to talk about not just what we see, but some of the things that happened underneath that you cannot see in the manuscript. So I'm hoping this research will help us to delve into much deeper issues that are not in the manuscript. And I'll going through with this outline. I will share with what the problem was, what motivated this idea, and through literature highlights. And I will just focus on the theory because it's a quantitative study. Theory is very important in driving the work. So I'll share with how, with my co-author, we taught about these theories and how we integrated it throughout the study to be able to tell the story for this quantitative research. So the research is on social sustainability of food events. But why social sustainability? Why is it so important? And whenever we talk of sustainability, we do know that there are pillars of sustainability, but usually there's a lot of concentration on the economic and the environment. And it doesn't mean they are less important. All of them are equally important. But for tourism development to be successful, we do agree that we need a harmonious relationship between people, right? The residents and the tourists themselves should have a harmonious coexistence for the tourism development to be successful. And residents must also own the tourism development. And for tourism to be able to propel the social transformation that we need, it has to be socially sustainable. And one of the key ways to be able to do this is through food events, right? Because one important thing about food is that it is constructed around social relations. We talk over food, we discuss things sometimes around food, around lunchtime. And so food festival events are a very good context to be able to trigger some of the social transformation. And also, food is a very important tool to connect people with places. Sometimes you can know a place through the food you eat about that place without even visiting that place. You can travel around the world through the food that you consume. So food has that transformative power and a tool for us to promote destination through the social sustainability. But what do we know about the research that exists on festival events? One of the things that got me very interested was that this very events that I decided to study and other ones that I've observed, there's been a lot of studies looking at festival attendees, okay, and their repurchase intention or satisfaction, mostly towards economic aspect of it, a few touching on cultural aspect of it, but not much on the social sustainability or how residents even think of the events. But then there are recognition that yes, there is some form of impact that food festivals could bring to destination. But there are questions, what sort of impacts? And if it brings impacts, why should residents even care? Why should residents support these food events? And from residents' perspective, a lot of the research, you realize that there is a lack of resident voice. And some earlier studies have pointed to the need that we need to really delve into how residents feel about these. So it was these call for further studies that motivated me to look into a project examining the social sustainability of food events from resident perspective. So I decided to take a different group other than what my predecessors have done with visitors. I do want to highlight that since sustainability comprises all the elements, this was the beginning of what I use to conceptualize what social sustainability should constitute. But this is something we could discuss more later in the seminar. So to be able to achieve this and these questions that I've raised, I set some objectives, right? It's a quantitative studies, just like a qualitative study. I need directions to be able to know what I'm testing, what I'm not testing. And so 3 objectives were set for this project. And there were some variables that were very important. Now, the first variable was the role of perceived social sustainability attributes of the events. So every social event has some attributes of it. And one of the interests or the objective was to find out how these attributes and perceived social impact of the events impacts residents' quality of life. So we want to understand whether residents' quality of life will be influenced by their perception of the impact of the events. And then the second objective was to find out whether this quality of life that we've examined will also impact their pro-social behaviors, support for tourism, and place attachment. The very final and the third objective was to ascertain whether if a resident has attended the event versus if a resident had not attended event, whether they will have different attitude towards the event. So these were the 3 objectives. And to be able to do that, we needed some theories to help us anchor these objectives and to test them and to produce very robust results. So there are 2 theories I want to share with you that we use to work through these objectives. And the first one, which is very popular, is a social exchange theory. And basically, social exchange theory tells us that social behavior is as a result of an exchange process, right? So within every relationship, there is always that need to do a cost-benefit analysis. Now, cost-benefit analysis means that people engage in that relationship will evaluate the relationship, whether it's bringing benefit to them. So if I feel that the relationship is benefiting me, there's a high chance that I will engage in it. If I feel that it's going to be costly to me, chances that I'll withdraw. And so in this case, what is important for this very project is that if residents feel that the festival will bring positive impacts to them or will bring positive quality of life benefits to them, then there is a high chance that they will support. And so social exchange was helping us to explain the quality of life outcomes of the project. But as we have 3 objectives, there are also limitations of social exchange theory, because it is not able to tell us how those that have attended and those that have not attended could be distinguished or could be examined. And so a second theory was very needed so we could integrate both of them and be able to tell a better story. And so the self-perception theory is also another theory that argues that people can infer their attitude from their behaviors. So it's a bit counterintuitive to the typical attitudinal theories that we know, because it says that you can observe your behavior and then that could inform your attitude. So for example, somebody that goes to the festival very often can say that because I go to the festival very often, the food festival, I think of myself as a foodie. So the person observes their behavior and based on their behavior, inflicts that attitude on themselves. And so then here we see that behavior can inform people's attitude. And why is this important? And what is this theory explaining? Because we were interested in the third objective to look at whether if people have participated in the food festival, it will impact their attitude in terms of perception attitude. We decided to bring this theory to see how that condition, so the condition of whether you've attended or not attended, will impact their attitude. And so that's where the self-perception theory comes in. And so we bring the self-perception theory and the social exchange theory together to be able to explain and test the objective and a set of hypotheses to be able to produce very useful results. And so this is how the framework for the study looked like. So on my left-hand side is the self-perception attitudinal variables that we're looking at. So we're looking at how the perceptions are informed by whether someone has attended the events or someone has not attended events. How will that person evaluate based on their participation status? And then on the other side, on my right-hand side, is the social exchange outcome. So this is where residents will evaluate the sort of outcomes based on whether they feel that they are benefiting from the event or they are losing out of the events. So this is how the 2 theories were integrated to help us address the objectives that I mentioned earlier. So 6 objectives were generally set, but there were sub-ones to test moderation effect, which is pretty much a conditional effect. So the condition whether somebody has visited the event and the condition that the person has not visited. So we want to see whether there will be, different levels or it will change the direction of the relationship or strength of a relationship. So that is basically what we were looking at. So the hypothesis that were tested was to find out whether the perceived social sustainability attributes of the event will impact how people evaluate the event's impacts and also the quality of life. So how the attributes impact perceived impact and also quality of life. And then we also look at how the perceived impact also impacts quality of life and how perceived quality of life also triggers certain outcomes, like would people feel attached if they feel the event is benefiting them? If people support tourism, if they feel the event is impacting on their quality of life? Or will they be pro-social? Will they be willing to help others? Will they be able to interact with people more? So we wanted to see these outcomes as well. And so these hypotheses were set, and I will share the context where the study was conducted. I did mention earlier that I was teaching in Macau, and so this was where this project was conducted. And so Macau is a special administrative region of the People's Republic of China. Very beautiful city with more than 600,000 people. And so the Macau Food Festival it's a very iconic event that if you are in the region, especially within this time, November to December, you need to see the event. Why is it so special? Because next to Macau is Hong Kong, with also a very cosmopolitan nature. So why is it so important? Because Macau combines what we call the Macanese food. It combines Portuguese and Cantonese food, which is very special and not common within the region. And so this event is one of the places to really encounter this unique culture. And so a lot of tourists and locals will come to this event, and that is one reason why also visitors have been a lot of the focus of a lot of the research, because it attracts a lot of visitors. But we also need to listen to residents' voice concerning this event, which was the purpose of the study. And so the very event that was the focus of this present study was in 2022. So that was the 22nd Macau Food Festival. And I wanted to add that as I speak now, there is one that is running currently. It started in October and it is running up to 1st December. So that is it's an annual event. So every year it happens. This year's one, this is the date. So it should be running now as we speak. And so this was the context within which the study took place. So let me talk more details about the analytical process. How did we collect data? What instrument was used? And so forth. Because it was a quantitative study, we used a questionnaire. And by questionnaire is a structured set of questions that people are supposed to choose. Some were categorical. For example, we had a binary question asking people whether they have attended the event or have not attended the event. So those were categorical. But the other items like quality of life, perceived impact were Likert scale format. And I will show you a photo in a bit. So the residents have to choose. Our target was the residents of Macau, because like I mentioned, the purpose was to be able to get residents' voice. So it wasn't just anybody, only residents in Macau that have been staying in Macau were the focus of the study. And so what we did to be able to get residents, and it didn't matter whether the resident had attended or not, because we needed every resident's voice. Okay, we needed every resident's voice. And that's why you see that the sampling that was used was non-probability sampling, which is purposive. So we didn't want to do random where somebody that is not a resident comes in. So purposively, we selected only residents who have either attended the event or have not attended the event. And we did it during the same period this time so that we could get both sides of the story within the region. And so we trained students who went out as enumerators after the questionnaire itself was developed in a bilingual way with the help of Dr. Jia, who was my former PhD student. So he helped do all the translation, which I cannot read. If you ask me, I'm sorry. But so we had the English version and then we had a Chinese version to be able to help people make a choice of what they want to use in terms of addressing the questionnaire. And then after completing, or after participants completing each of the questionnaire, we have to take the whole data, clean them, and also take it through a 4-stage procedure, which means that to test the hypothesis, we first had to do an exploratory factor analysis. And the purpose was to be able to get the different factors to be able to represent the various dimensions that we are going to test. And then we have to do the confirmatory analysis and to be able to also test some model fit indices that is required statistically to see whether the model that we have proposed fits the data, and is it right, and is it rigorous or valid. And so we went through a lot of checks in terms of convergent validity, and by convergent, we want to be sure that for each construct, the items come together, they gel well to constitute a construct. And by testing, say, discriminant validity, we want to see that each construct is unique from the others and there is no overlap. And that's really the purpose, so that when we say this item together constitute quality of life, it means they stand alone and they do not conflict with other things, so that the model could be said to be valid in that way. And so we went through all those stages with a model fit test to ensure that the data it's very fitting. And then a structural modeling process was used to really test the path, whether one construct impacts the other. And then the final thing was to do the moderation or interaction analysis to see whether the participation status, which is part of the self-perception theory, will be confirmed or will not be confirmed, because it's quantitative. So we're trying to also see whether some of these theories could be confirmed or could be disproved. And so that's what we went through. That I have shared some resources on how I did and plotted the moderation analysis for those that are interested with a QR code. If you are interested, I will share it again. And so these are the results that we found in terms of who attend the residents. Those that have attended or not attended, we group them together. So in terms of the residents that were surveyed, majority of them were females, and then 38% were males. And many of them that participated were also very young, and I will talk about that later in the limitation. But on the right-hand side is those who have attended the events and those who have not attended the event. So the predominant residents that we surveyed have attended the events, and very few had not attended the event, because it's so popular that residents are always drawn to go and see it themselves. So in addition to that, the table 2 there shows us the items that we use and the sort of statements that were given for each of the 6 constructs that were used. For example, the perceived social sustainability impact, the place attachment, pro-social behavior, perceived quality of life. So we have specific items that were measuring them, and they were all analyzed using the EFA first and the CFA to be able to say that, yes, indeed, these items are under a specific construct. And so that was for the 2 first stages of the analysis. And then the third stage was to look into the path analysis and find out whether the perceived social sustainability attributes of the event will impact the social sustainability impact. And we found that yes, the sort of attributes that residents perceived socially impacted how they rated the events in terms of its impact. And the same perceived sustainability attributes also impacted the quality of life, that the more residents feel that the event is culturally authentic, has more social interactions, they also think that it will have quality of life impact on them. And another important hypothesis was to find out whether residents' perception of the perceived quality of life will impact how they feel or how they will support the event. So when we tested that, we realized that they did support the event and that their quality of life impacted the support of the event, place attachment, and also pro-social behavior, which were the 3 outcome variables. But key to the self-perception theory, which I mentioned earlier, was that we were very much interested, and this was very important for us in making a significant contribution to the theory itself, whether if someone has participated in the event, and if someone has not participated in the event, will this condition have an impact on how they rated the attributes, or how the attributes relationship is to, let's say, quality of life? And then, so we had 2 moderation. One was to see whether the relationship between the attributes impacted quality of life. And the other one was to see whether the moderated was on perceived impact and quality of life. So the perceived impact and quality of life being moderated by these two variables was not significant. So that's the unsupported one, the H3B. But then we realized that there was a moderation effect of these two conditions on the perceived attributes and quality of life. And I will be explaining what it means. So then if a resident, if you look at the graph on my left, you see that the green line is very steep and it's a bit above the purple line. The green line was those that have not attended the events. So they've not been to the events, but certainly they've heard about the events. They've not been to the event. And the purple are people who have attended. So they have that behavioral element. And so our hypothesis was that these people that have that behavioral element will have a higher attitude towards the event because they can infer their attitudes from their behavior based on the self-perception theory that we proposed. So this was our argument. And indeed, yes, they did. However, it was surprising because we had thought that those that have not participated based on the self-perception theory probably will not have any positive attitude because they've not been there. But contrary to what we thought of, we realized that people that have not attended the event also thought highly of the event. So both of them thought highly of the events. But interestingly, those that have not even been to the events thought highly of the events more than those that have been there. And so that was very interesting finding, and also to kind of challenge the self-perception theory, which focused on though behavior being the point of inference for attitude, but we realized that non-behavior could also be an inference for an attitude, especially in this case, and I explain later, in this case because people that have not attended the event in Macau are exposed to a lot of social media marketing about the event. And they are also exposed to a lot of word of mouth of the majority that have attended the event. So even though they have not been there and they don't have any behavioral element as the base to have an attitude, they form their attitude based on what they have heard, social media, and what others have told them. And because they have not been there at all, they cannot validate. They have a very high level of the event's impact on their quality of life. And for that reason, we could see from the analysis we did being very high. And I think my collaborator and I, we had this discussion. It was very interesting because being in the region and seeing how the festival is marketed and all the, media going around it is just very likely that people that have not been there still have a very high sense of its impact on their lives. So that was a big contribution for us in terms of adding on to the self-perception theory that we shouldn't say that, or we shouldn't limit the inferences to just people that have that behavioral element, but people who don't have that behavioral element could also be able to deduce an attitude. So you probably haven't been to a place, but maybe based on what somebody has told you or based on social media, you can form an attitude over that thing. And I think that was something that we're able to add to the self-perception theory. So one important thing that we also could add was the fact that we found out that the social sustainability attributes were key antecedents of how the festival's impact and quality of life was evaluated. So residents use the attributes of the event to judge the sort of impact they think the event will have on them and the sort of quality of life consequences it has on them. So they are just looking at whether the festival is very culturally authentic, if it has social interactions. They put all these two together to inform themselves of how they will benefit in terms of quality of life. And we also realized that the perceived quality of life influenced their support for tourism. And this was the social exchange outcomes, that if they feel that the food festival event has a very high impact on their well-being, it's also triggers their willingness, be very pro-social when they are the events or even during the period, because they know that the festival benefits them. And so when they see visitors or other residents hanging around for the event, they are always willing to help them. They're willing to show directions, even give directions to, let's say, somebody who wants to try a different food. They are willing to help you because they know that if you are there at the event, it brings a lot of benefits to them. And so they go through this exchange process of evaluating the festival benefit and, trying to react in support of the event, and also being pro-social and being attached to the city. Let's remember that because the city is very popular for this event, people come to the city, tourists and visitors, to see the city. So then it becomes a very special place for them, a special place that they want to be. They don't want to be any other city other than the city because it's very special. It has the Macanese food that other cities do not have. And so it creates all these outcomes, and social exchange was able to help us delve deeper into this aspect of the work. And so, as I have explained before, we're able to kind of extend the self-perception theory by looking at how not just behaviors could be the source of making inference, but non-behaviors through word of mouth and social marketing could also be a source where people can form attitude of the events. And so that was a very important addition to the self-perception theory. But there are practical implications also for the event organizers. And every year as they organize, if they would want to understand how residents or what the needs of residents are, what we have done is to let these organizers know why residents support the events. The social sustainability of the event is important, but we add on the explanation of why do they support the events. They support the events through the quality of life elements, the fact that it brings peace, it increases the social harmony within the region. And so when they are marketing the events, these are the things they need to really highlight in their marketing posters so that it can garner residents' support, because that's what matters to residents. There are things residents are looking for. And also the understanding that certain attributes of the events trigger perception of quality impact means that those attributes could also be elements that could be highlighted during the event. Okay, so those elements could be even used as themes during the event. So if you want to have a culturally authentic experience at the event, this is the standard you go. And so these elements that we've identified in our study could be a thematic terms that could be used in the sort of themes that develop around the event so that residents' social needs will be met. And if there is a harmony coexistence, then tourism will be able to make the transformation that it has to make in this case. And so these were some of the key practical implications that were added. But there are some limitations that needs to be acknowledged, right? Because during the time that the study was conducted, China was still observing some restrictions. So there was also the need for people to socially connect because of the lockdown and things. These events were just connecting people. So there's a high chance that people might have rated their social needs a bit higher than maybe post-COVID. And I think that's something that is a caveat that I need to highlight. And then we also see that lots of the people during that period and also in relation to COVID were more young adults. We didn't have much older people in the population, and that's why a post-COVID study will be very needed. Another thing is that Macau has a very vibrant migrant population, because that was not the focus of our study, we didn't really ask whether different migrant group had different perceptions. And here I mean migrant residents had different perceptions of the event, depending on how long they've stayed within the city. We didn't ask that, but it's something worth exploring in future studies. And then the last one was, some reflections and lessons and some challenges. To remember, I did mention that there are a lot of things that happen underneath what we see. And I think one of the things that the project also got us thinking through very well was the theoretical integration. Why are we choosing social exchange and self-perception theory, and reflecting on our objectives? What do we really want out of these studies, and how can we bring these theories together in a way that makes the work more robust? Because each one has its own strength and each one has its own weakness, and we felt like by bringing them together, the self-perception theory was able to balance the weaknesses of social exchange. But that was not easy. It's not like we woke up and we found the theories. It wasn't easy. Social exchange, I guess, was much easier, but finding the additional one to match up with it was quite a difficult thing, and a lot of reading has to go on to be able to find who could pair to address the objectives. And so just, I guess, being very patient and looking for the right theories to help support the hypothesis that we test is a lesson that I picked from this work. And then I must say, design and research of interest. I remember that this project is something that it was very interesting to me, having observed that there were not much resident studies done in the area. And I think after I had launched the project and we're in the process, then I saw a special issue by Alicia that was advertising a very similar thing, and I felt it was just so fitting to participate in the special issue where we shared the results in. So because it was something that was already of interest to us, and it was already an ongoing project, not because of the special issue, but because of the fact that it was a need and it was an interest, it helped us to just go through that journey, and not because there's a special issue being advertised, so we jump into it. No, so designing research of interest usually help keep that passion whilst you're going through the revision process, etc. And then, aligning the analysis with theory was also another lesson that I took from this project. Before, when I found self-perception theory as an addition to social exchange theory, I had thought of a multi-group analysis, I remember. But then I realized multi-group is not really going to explain the sort of theoretical nuances that self-perception theory is speaking of. And so I was a bit, what should I do? And then I realized, I think it's a condition. So moderation will be the appropriate one. So just taking some time and trying to see how the theory and the analysis will align, and being flexible and changing when the need arises is also a very good lesson that I took from this. And yes, just change when you feel there is a better way to do it. There's a better way to do it rather than doing the multi-group analysis, which is probably going to be just group difference comparison, rather than explaining which the self-perception theory is doing in this case. So that was also very important. And certainly teamwork, having to discuss with Dr. Zhao on some of the comments that came and how we could work through it. I always say the reviewers don't see individuals, they see just one paper. It's a team, so we have to pull forces together. Sometimes I am free, he's not free. Sometimes he's free, I'm not free. But still, we have to find how we could work when each other can, so that we'll be able to pull a good work together. And the final thing was a thorough revision, thanks to the team, the special issue editors and the reviewers calling for a methodological transparency. It was a very useful thing to do, to just go through the entire process of data collection and analysis, and just being transparent of whatever you did, and just tell them, this is what I did, this is the justification of why I did it, and these are the reasons behind what I did. And I think it was very enlightening, just taking kind of a reflexivity, sort of just taking a step back and just looking at what you did, what was right or what was wrong, how you addressed it as part of the paper, was also a very enlightening thing that I feel is good practice to do in research. And so, yes, these are the lessons and reflections that I had through this project. And that will be the end. And yeah, thanks to Dr. Jha, who contributed to this project as well. I don't know whether he was able to join or not, but yes, that will be the end of this presentation, and I am happy to take any further questions. And of course, any other questions that you want to ask me.